Pelissero, who went on Rich Eisen earlier this week and basically spoke as if he was Brock Purdy's agent, made the case for Brock Purdy making top of the market, not top 10 of the market. He made sure to clarify that if the 49ers were to offer Brock Purdy $50 million, which would make him the 10th highest paid quarterback, that Brock Purdy would deny that. He wants top of the market value, which is 60 plus million. And Tom had his stats and figures ready and made a case for why Brock Purdy deserves to make that much. Something that I found interesting. One was just that in general, he had those stats ready. It sounded like maybe that was someone's agent talking through him, but also all the stats that he happened to bring up were from last year for the most part. Right. When making a case for Brock Purdy, you kind of can't bring up this year because he's been pretty middle of the road average. In certain games, he's been way below average. In other, games, maybe he's added a little bit to his team. I think it's abundantly clear that Brock Purdy is not worth $60 million. I think that would doom the 49ers franchise. We have a lot more people that had things to say about it. But before I get into all the quotes that came out after Tom Pelissero said this, which, by the way, just timing-wise, if this was from Brock Purdy's agent, was kind of crazy because he went on Rich Eisen a couple days after Brock Purdy just had a stinker of a game. You would kind of hope that you save that for, if he goes off against Miami this week or something, not the game where Brock Purdy doesn't score a touchdown and, hasn't been able to complete a deep pass in like 5 games. But
well, that might be why the agent decided to step in, because he doesn't want, he did it for damage control. That
okay,
he doesn't want the narrative to become Brock Purdy just doesn't have it any longer. And so he steps in and says, here's all the reasons you do keep Brock Purdy and you pay him top of the market. I think that's what the agent was doing. His agent is Kyle Strongen, who represents Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor, I saw that. And I wasn't it last week on the show that I talked about Trevor Lawrence's contract?
Yeah.
I'm still looking at that one as a maybe ballpark for what the 49ers do with Brock Purdy, which I know that you had some pushback on because of the guaranteed money and the upfront value, right?
Yeah, well, I think the Yorks will balk a little bit because the Trevor Lawrence deal was 5 years, $275 million, but 200 of it guaranteed and $143 million up front. That's a lot. So I don't think the Yorks would be all that happy about paying Brock that much, especially upfront and guaranteed. Fans tend to just look at, what's the cap hit? What's the average annual value? We pay no attention to the other stuff, but the Yorks do. And I think that's where this negotiation really is. It's not so much Kyle and John, it's the Yorks.
Okay. Now, I do want to say, before we get into this, because for the most part of the show, I'm probably going to make it very clear that I do not think the 49ers should pay Brock Purdy even close to $60 million.
Yeah.
But I do want to clarify, I don't think Brock is a bad person for wanting that. That is what the market
it's natural
right now. The way that the NFL is set up, I think is pretty poor. I actually think maybe and basketball has a lot of things that are wrong about it, but I do like that there's kind of tiers to how much you can get paid based on your production. And I kind of hate that just if you're a quarterback who a team wants to keep, even if you're middle of the road average, if you're up to get paid, it's automatically expected that you're just going to reset the quarterback market. I think that really dooms a franchise. And when you look at franchises who have paid their quarterback on that structure, I think they've immediately regretted it. I know just because we're about to go see them, 49ers about to go see them, I have Miami on the brain. I think immediately people thought, oh, they're way overpaying Tua. He's not worth that. I wonder if even Miami felt that way, but just felt pressure to, this is a quarterback that we want to keep. And this is what the market says his value is. So this is what we have to pay him. And it kind of automatically dooms your franchise. I think about the Cowboys a lot when I've gotten pushback about, not paying Brock Purdy and people saying, oh, well, he's played so good, you have to pay him. I think when you're having the conversation about paying Brock Purdy, you have to understand that means you're not going to allocate that money somewhere else. So your quarterback has to be good enough to, if you're anyone, I know my dad's a big guy in this category who says, they need to bolster up the offensive line. They need to pay offensive linemen. They need to draft offensive linemen. If you're paying your quarterback $60 million, you're going to have a bad offensive line, and you have to hope that your quarterback is like Josh Allen and can work without that. Looking around the league, Brock Purdy, even with injuries, has a lot better weapons than a lot of teams and their quarterbacks have, and quarterbacks have to overcome not having that offensive talent because they're getting the bulk of the money. And so the presumption is that their play is so elevated that they can elevate a bad team. If you're an average quarterback who's going to rely on the rest of the team being good, then I look at a quarterback like Sam Darnold, who in the perfect situation has looked really good. He has a great coach, an offense that hasn't, the league hasn't totally figured out yet, a star wide receiver, a great offensive line, but he's making so little that the rest of the team can get paid that. And I think when you talk about paying someone more than a Josh Allen, more than a Patrick Mahomes, you have to ask, are they going to be able to carry the team in the ways that those quarterbacks are? And my response would be no. However, I don't blame Brock Purdy for wanting that, because that's what the market so far for the NFL has said that you should be asking for.
Yeah.
I think
it's standard. It's just, you're up for your contract, you ask for the top of the market. That's just what you do as a player. I don't hold any of that against him. It's the person that we would need to hold anything against would be Jed. If he makes this, he says, okay, we're going to sign you for whatever. That's Jed's call, ultimately. Kyle and John can say various things and try to get it down, but we can apply all the football stuff all we want. The fact remains, the Yorks want to use Brock as the future face of the franchise, and they're willing to pay for that. And that's why, ultimately, this is really about what the Yorks want to do, and they want Brock. And so you can't switch it out and say, from a football perspective, Sam Darnold has had a better year and he would cost half. Go get him. And the Yorks would say no, because we want Brock to be the future face of the franchise. That's what's driving this, is that they want to market their quarterback long term. They want to sign him. They want to lock him up. So there is no alternative.
That's an interesting takeaway. I feel like the 49ers don't want to pay Brock that much money. And a big hint
Kyle and John don't, but do the Yorks care? I think they'll care about how much money up front. They'll care how much guaranteed, but I think they've already decided they want Brock, and they don't want somebody else.
I see what you're saying, because I know last year in Orlando, right at the beginning of the offseason, Jed York came out and said that Brock was, going to be the future of the franchise, and at the time guaranteed him $50 million, which was the quarterback market at that time. It's just exploded in the last year. So I see why you could say that. My one pushback would be, when he did make those comments, the 49ers were coming off of an incredible year with Brock. And then also, I think their number one priority is money, and which you agree with. And you're saying that marketing Brock Purdy is something that is going to bring them money. I think making the playoffs is something that's going to bring them money. And right now what we've seen is, with talent all around him, Brock Purdy, his ceiling can get you to the Super Bowl. But when the veteran players can't, they're getting injured, they can't play every game, when you've missed on a couple draft picks, and you can't pay a bunch of guys in free agency because all of a sudden your quarterback goes from being, the least paid quarterback in the NFL to the highest, that's to me, that could put your franchise in purgatory. And if you're not getting home playoff games, that's so much money that the Yorks are missing, that I think that Jed York will bow to whatever Kyle wants. That's my hypothesis right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
And again, it's just from a business perspective, it makes sense to make Brock your franchise guy. He's young. He's central casting. He's the quarterback. Quarterbacks last a long time. He can
But
play for the Niners for a
if they
decade.
start missing the playoffs,
Yeah,
then
and they missed
you're
the playoffs
losing way
this
more
year.
money
There were
than
a
you're
lot of
making.
things that went wrong. They made a lot of stupid decisions and paid for it. But next year they have a much easier schedule. Even if they continue to do things incorrectly, they can probably stumble their way to the wild card at the least next year. If they don't make the playoffs a second straight year, then they have to evaluate everything. Whether the Yorks are willing
Agreed.
to do that or not, I
If
don't
they
know.
pay him now, you can't evaluate him next year. You're going to be locked in.
Yeah, yeah. And then that's something that they're willing to live with. I know that you want to think strictly in football terms, strictly in terms of a fan, and you're saying, okay, if you pay Brock this much, you go into, and I wrote the article this week about purgatory, where it's you go into Brock Purdy infused purgatory, and that's going to happen anyway because Kyle Shanahan's your GM. They're not going to win a ring, whether Purdy's the quarterback or not. If Shanahan is still the GM, they're going ringless. And so, does it really matter? For the Yorks, they can say, well, as long as we fill the
I think
stadium, as long as we make the playoffs, as long as Kyle gives us home playoff games, that makes the cash register ring. That's all we care about. We don't really care about rings here. We care about money.
maybe this is unpopular, but I think paying Brock Purdy $60 million makes it so you're not going to get home playoff games in the future.
Maybe not.
Because
Maybe
I
not.
know maybe they're playing an easier schedule next year, but I don't think
But
a 29-year-old Christian McCaffrey is going to be that much, more productive.
yeah,
I don't think he's all of a sudden going to be his healthy 26-year-old self. I hope that for him. I obviously am not wishing injury on someone, but running backs in general fall off a cliff, and he's coming off of 2 major injuries.
yeah. But that's
Same
related to
thing
Kyle.
with what they do at
That's
wide
not related to
receiver.
Brock.
What happened?
That's related to Kyle, not Brock, is the thing. Brock can argue, well, that's Kyle's decision. That's not up to us. If I'm Kyle's agent, I say that, well, that scenario could unfold, but is that on Brock Purdy or is that on Kyle Shanahan? The agent's going to say Shanahan.
I agree. I think Shanahan has his. I think that Shanahan needs a lot of power demoted for him, but I don't think you just pay Brock Purdy because Shanahan also has issues.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no.
I
In a
have
perfect world, you don't pay Brock $60 million,
right.
but given the business environment of what the Orcs want to do, they're going to want Brock. They're not going to want an alternative. And we've seen the
I
history of
disagree.
this team in negotiations where ultimately they cave. And
Okay,
they want Brock locked up. Here we go.
I want to present a case because Tom Pelissero went out on Rich Eisen. He made the case for paying Brock Purdy top of the market. He specifically mentioned Dak's contract, which is $60 million. He said that is the ballpark that Brock Purdy is looking at. He mentioned $50 million and said that would not be enough for Brock. Couple days later, actually during a game, Greg Papa, who is employed by the 49ers, I think that's important. 49ers
Yeah.
leak. They
And he's a
leak a
homer.
lot. They leak a lot through Matt Mayoko. We see reports, but also Greg Papa. He's an announcer for the team. He speaks for the team. He talks directly with not just Kyle and John Lynch, but Jed York. This is someone who Jed York pays his paychecks, and he went out after the Pelissero rumor, report, whatever you want to call it, think piece came out. And Greg Papa responded. And I'll get to what he said, but my thought is negotiations are starting already.
Oh, sure.
This is
Posturing.
Brock's agent and then the 49ers, and they are setting the parameters for where they're going to start this negotiation. I want to talk about a little bit of what Greg Papa said, basically in response to Tom Pelissero. Papa said on the broadcast, I don't think Brock Purdy is going to get 50 plus, but I think they'll work out a number. They want Brock Purdy signed, sealed, and delivered, but not for that. Then he goes on, by the way, 3 days later, today, he talks about Brock's weaknesses in the rain, talks about Brock Purdy not having a strong arm, brings up that he's 1-9 in his last deep throw attempts, really doubles down because this happened. Greg Papa was talking on Sunday, then today doubled down on Brock Purdy's weaknesses. I think that and he basically talks about the system and how much that's helped Brock Purdy, and how Brock Purdy Greg Papa, by the way, speaking for Brock Purdy, says that Brock is aware that with the help of Kyle and the weapons around him, it's the system as a whole that flows. So really saying Brock is a piece of an entire system that when together or when, fit together can run really well, but he's not necessarily leading the ship. And if your ship is sinking, Brock isn't the guy who's going to pull you out of the water on his own. He's more going to enhance your ship he's going to make your ship run smoother, go faster while it's running well. But if it's sinking, he can't carry it by himself. And so I think that this is the 49ers basically saying Brock is a system QB and he sure in hell isn't worth 60 million plus, and he should know that. Like I said, Greg Papa brought up he said, I don't think he's going to get 50 mil, meaning that the 49ers are, I guess what they're saying is it would be best for us if Brock makes less than 50, where Brock's agent on the other side is saying 50 isn't, like, don't even start there. We're not going to accept that.
Right.
So they're at least over 10 million apart right now.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's fair for me to
that's
assume?
likely to continue? Papa can say those things, and that's the 49er position is absolutely correct on the field. But yeah, so I mean, you look at this from the negotiation perspective, the Niners have always caved. And so you can say all these things. The Niners have done that before. What happened? Player got what he wanted in the end. And now that they've seen what happens when they drag out the negotiations into camp and then the team doesn't play together and then it has a poor season, they know that they need to bring everybody together. They know they're going to have to get Purdy signed before camp begins. So I think that given the experience of this year, they're going to look at it and say, we need to sign Brock. And yeah, from a football perspective, we can argue all of this stuff. He can't play in the rain. He has a poor arm. He doesn't learn from his mistakes. He keeps throwing the same interceptions for the same reasons. You can point to all of that. All of it's true. Doesn't matter. The Niners contract negotiation history is caving.
We were looking at the weather. Our last show,
Sure.
we were looking at the weather to try to see if Brock would have a good game or not. That you can't do that with your franchise quarterback. You can't see in Northern California when it's December, when it's late December, these are critical must-win games. Even go back to last year, say they've been winning all these games. These late December games are going to be important whether you started the year strong or not. And you can't automatically go, oh, there's some precipitation in the air. Apparently can't say that word.
It's rain. We're going to lose. Yeah.
Brock's going to have
all that stuff. All that stuff, Ashley. You can point to all of it. It doesn't matter.
It's just like humidity too, because he fumbled in the dome of the Vikings game, and then Lombardi went out and said, "Oh, it was hot because it was the dome."
Please.
So.
Well, but that's Lombardi. I mean, Lombardi's positions are based on laundry, not football. What uniform are you wearing? That's where Lombardi is.
Agreed.
So there's no reason to take him seriously.
I have some added on. I have more quotes from other people, but sticking with my Brock Purdy take, we're saying the market. What I would like to say with Brock Purdy is, what if we did let the market decide? What if John Lynch or Kyle or whoever told Brock Purdy's agent, go out and ask what you would get from another team, and if they'd be willing to pay you that and give us 2 first-round picks in return, and if you can get that, we'll either A, match it, or B, if we don't want to match it, we'll trade you. Because that's what a market is, right? If Josh Allen was on the market right now, there'd be a team out there that would pay him plus 60, and they would trade 3 first-round picks for him.
At least, yeah. But Brock Purdy isn't Josh Allen.
If we're talking about the market and letting the market decide Brock Purdy's value, there's no team that would be willing to trade or pay Brock Purdy as much as the 49ers are about to pay them. So couldn't the 49ers say, hey, you're not, like, if you can go out and find a team that's willing to give you 65 or 60 plus, let us know. But right now, we don't think that that's your value. And if we're
Well,
wrong,
and it
come
isn't,
back to us.
but it doesn't matter. Again, none of this matters
It does
because
matter. Because
the
then couldn't
Niners.
they just say, you're on it, you're set, like, play out the rest of your
Well,
deal?
you can make all the arguments in the world. They can be 1,000,000% correct in this instance. They are. No team is going to pay Brock Purdy 60 million. Doesn't matter. He can just say, okay, then I'm going to hold out, and you're not going to have your quarterback in camp to begin the year. And the Niners know based on this year, they can't do that. And so he's got that trump card to use. He'll use it. And there's nothing the Niners can do. Plus, again, the Niners' history. I mean, all these things you're saying are 1,000,000% correct on the field. They're absolutely correct. They're undeniable. All of those arguments. My argument is the Niners cave, and Purdy can say, I'll hold out, and the Niners will react to that because this year was sunk, basically, by not having the offense together in camp to get continuity to start the year. Everybody parachuted in. The team wasn't unified at all. It
Great.
was all these independent contractors. The Niners know that they have to avoid that this time around in 2025. So they're going to be, overreacting to somebody saying, I'm going to hold out. Last year, they're saying, yeah, go ahead. We'll sign you at the end. Next year, they're going to know we can't do that because the team will lose. And so
Brock
if
Purdy,
Purdy says, I'll hold out, the Niners are going to respond to that. And again, their history is caving. I agree with you on every argument you make on the field, every single one of them. All of the arguments about no team will pay him, absolutely true. Doesn't matter. Purdy can say, I'll hold out. Niners will react to that. They'll cave.
what if he says, what if they offer him a deal? They say, you accept this. If you want more than this, then we're going to trade you. Because we need to get you signed now. We want to I agree. I made it a topic later on where I said, how could the season be better going to next year? And a big thing that I think they've failed to do this season, and honestly for the last couple seasons, is really make each new year and each new season, that's the team. Not a bunch of the old core and then scraps around it. No, I want unity. I want a consistent message. I want out with the old. We're not trying to redo the 2019 season. We're not trying to redo last year's Super Bowl season. This is a new year each and every year. I think that is very important. And the 49ers, especially under Kyle, have absolutely not done that. It's been like
Yeah.
revenge tour 87.
Yeah.
So I agree. Huge issue that they had this year was how many people were not in training camp. They were not bonding together. Brock Purdy was not in rhythm with his weapons, the offensive line. All of that everyone needs to be there. There needs to be a standard for the 49ers
Yeah.
going into this offseason to set them up for the year. Completely agree with that. I think that the 49ers in that case should then say, this is, the offer that we're willing to give you. Yes or no. If no, and if you're going to threaten to hold out in camp, then we're going to trade you to the Bears and you can duke it out for a job with, Caleb Williams, and we're going to trade for Sam Darnold and pay him 20 million, and that'll be it.
The problem with trading Brock is every team in the league will know that he wants 60, so they won't trade for him. So you can't trade him. That's the other problem. Aegon in the comments says you're all tripping. Purdy's not worth it. I agree. I'm just saying here's the reality. The reality is the Yorks are going to lead us down that road, and Kyle's not going to get in the way of it. John's not going to get in the way of it. And look at the thinking that's gone through all this. If not Kyle, who? If not Brock, who? There's a fear of the unknown in this franchise, and that's leading the decision making. I call it, back in my consulting days, the inertia wave, where you ride the inertia of the moment and you react to things just kind of sake of appearances, status quo, keep things moving. And you never make the critical decision of, you know what? Kyle shouldn't be the GM. You know what? Brock isn't really the answer. There's no critical thinking in this organization because they aren't good decision makers. They'll make good decisions now and then. They won't make good decisions consistently. That's what separated Eddie D, Bill Walsh, John
It
McVay
would be a bad
from what we
decision to
have
pay Brock
now.
Purdy
Right.
60
But
mil.
Doesn't matter.
Can they
Again,
force
it's
him?
you can make every argument in the book. I will agree with you entirely. Purdy's not worth it. You can say no team will pay him. You're still dealing with the inertia wave from the Yorks. We want Brock to be our future franchise, our current franchise, and we're willing to pay him to do that. And if he has any thoughts of saying, I'm going to hold out, they're going to ask the same thing that Purdy's fans do, if not Brock who. You know, the Yorks are hesitant to move off of those things. If not Kyle who, that's why Kyle stays in every role. If not Brock who, that's why Brock stays. There's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear of making a decision. You don't really know where you're going with it. And they've failed in making those decisions in the past. You've got Tom Sula, Chip Kelly. You've got the Trey Lance trade. Every time that this decision-making group tries to make a decision, at best they're batting 500, and that's why they tend to ride the inertia wave because they don't want to take those risks. They've been burned by them in the past.
I hear what you're saying. I'm just gonna say some stats really quickly because I saved some for Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy went down 1 to 8 points in the fourth quarter in the regular season or the playoffs. Is 33 for 60, so less than half of a completion or 50% completion percentage. 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So he's more likely to throw an interception than a touchdown in the fourth quarter. A 57 passer rating. Brock Purdy ranks 144th out of 160 quarterbacks with 50% or with 50 plus attempts in this scenario since 2000. So for the last 25 years, Brock Purdy is almost the worst, in the bottom 10 out of 160 quarterbacks in leading his team to victory when they're losing by 1 point all the way to a touchdown or more. I don't think when I think of guys that you pay top of the market value, they're guys that when everything's running smoothly, they help the team. But when everything is down and the play callers shit that day, or your running back is hurt or whatever, that quarterback can lift you up.
Yeah.
I'm
with
see
you.
what you're saying.
I'm with
I
you all
agree
the
that
way.
this franchise seemingly operates out of fear. It frustrates me. I don't think that you can pay Brock Purdy. I want to get to some comments, but I'll say a couple more quotes that I have. Brian Baldinger, if you guys are on Twitter, he does a lot of really great breakdowns. He's also on NFL Network sometimes. He's made plenty of videos, by the way, praising Brock Purdy and his skill set. So you can't call him a hater. I think he does very fair analysis. He'll talk about sometimes Purdy missing a throw. Sometimes he'll, talk about Purdy keeping the game alive. And he does this for all teams, not just the 49ers, but he was on 95.7 The Game. And he was asked, is Brock Purdy worth top 5 money? And he said he would flip him for Sam Darnold. We have a comment, and I think that this kind of echoes us here, and I'd like to respond to this comment. Johnny's always in our chat, so I appreciate you. So Sam Darnold is a product of the players around him. Darnold sucks. I would say that last year, Brock Purdy was partially a product of the players around him. I think right now, I don't, and I feel like I'm going to come off as a Brock Purdy hater. When I've talked about wanting to pay Brock Purdy, I think that I actually feel like I have a really good idea of who Brock Purdy is. Like we saw him do very, very well. And then we've seen him with a lot less talent and with a play caller whose offensive system has gotten a little bit stale. And we've really seen him flounder in that situation, especially in the pressure moments. He makes some erratic decisions, and that's difficult because Brock Purdy, his skill set isn't his arm. His skill set isn't, being able to zip it through the snow. It really is, can you make the right decisions? Can you execute the system? And when he starts making erratic choices and turning the ball over, that's something a guy with his skill set cannot do. I think Sam Darnold, I don't think if Sam Darnold was on a shitty team, he'd be playing this well. But I don't think Brock Purdy would play well if he was on the Bears either. I think that they're pretty similar. I put them, and this is why I think a lot of this just stems from the NFL QB market being set up in a way that I just fundamentally disagree with, because I think there's your top elite guys who deserve to make, 10% or more of your salary cap, and they can do that. And then I think there's the really good but not elite guys, and I think there's average guys, and then I think there's just bad guys. I think Brock Purdy is in, between those middle categories. I think he's has some things that he does well. I think he can be efficient and play pretty well on a team that's set up well to win, but I don't think he's going to pull you up. I keep
No,
saying that, but I just
no,
you
no.
can't pay a
It's
guy
yeah.
60 million for that.
No,
To
you're
me,
right.
I like the
You're
Baker
right. You're
Mayfield
right.
deal.
You're right. I can keep going through all this stuff. You're right. You're absolutely right. And
Right?
it
Like,
doesn't
no
matter.
one you laughed earlier when I said the 2 first round picks.
Yeah, nobody's giving two
No
first
one's
round
trading
picks.
2 first round picks for Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield right now is winning. He just put 40.
Yeah.
The Tampa Bay, by the way, they've been out. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I think, just got back, but they were out for multiple games. Chris Godwin's out completely. And Baker Mayfield is like the top of the league of touchdowns. I don't know if he's still number 1, but I know he's top
Yeah,
3, I think,
he's
right
top
now.
three. Yeah.
And that's without his weapons.
Yeah.
Like, people keep giving the injury excuse to Brock Purdy. Yes, I'm sympathetic. Like, Christian McCaffrey went down. The running back that came in performed better than Christian McCaffrey was performing. So, like, for Purdy and for Kyle, by the way, because we can get into that. But I don't think that they're gonna make the stupid excuse of they're gonna pay Brock, they're gonna bring everyone back, and they're just gonna blame injuries, and that bothers me because Brandon Ayuk played 7 games this year. It's not like Brandon Ayuk played a game and got injured. Brandon Ayuk played for the majority of the beginning part of the season, and the 49ers lost those games. Yes, Christian McCaffrey was out. Jordan Mason was outperforming his production at that time. Like, they had some guys who were injured, but it wasn't like those injuries killed them because people were showing up in their place. So I think it's unfair to blame injuries. But you're right. I do think the 49ers, they operate out of fear. They don't want to, be middle. They want to be in talks, in, contention, but they don't actually care about winning. But it just frustrates me because as a fan who's, we make fun of the Cowboys, I see the 49ers making a decision that I think
Mistakes.
the Cowboys are right now, they're calling Micah Parsons bluff and basically, suggesting that they're going to trade him. I bet if they could, do a do-over, they'd rather not pay Dak and pay Micah. Sorry. You
Well,
agree with me. I'm just annoyed.
yeah. All of that stuff I agree. But
Mr. Corey, always in our
so what?
chat, says, I want
You can
Purdy.
make every argument and you can be dead right, and you are. What you want football based decisions. And that's the fundamental problem with this organization. Who's making the decisions? The Yorks. What are they making it based upon? Business, money, not rings. Who's making the decisions on the team? Kyle. What's he making the decisions based on? Whatever gives him what he believes to be the best chance to win a ring. And so he'll double down on Christian McCaffrey and he'll give the huge extension to Trent because that's his best chance to win. No one is acting in the best interest of the team on the field. And that's the problem. You've got the Yorks and Kyle who are not about what's happening on the grass. That's the fundamental issue with this entire organization. And so you can run through all of this and you can be absolutely right, and you are. All the football stuff, you can point to Baker Mayfield. You can point to Sam Darnold. You can point to everybody, but it doesn't matter because they don't make decisions based on football.
I agree. Okay. Well, a couple other people who I think have interesting comments. Jerry Rice